Hi, my name is Gabriel from St Joseph's College in Geelong, and I'm going to show you a dish from my street food folio, pulled pork sliders. So I wanted to focus on and show people how street food can be an alternative for fast food. Alright, so I've got 2 tablespoons of yeast here. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar, and to that I'm going to add 250 mils of warm water. And it's really important that the water is warm, otherwise it won't activate the yeast and the bread won't rise. I'm just going to give that a stir just to combine it all. And then we'll leave it for about 5 minutes until it's foamy, and then it'll be ready to add to the flour. So I've left the yeast mixture for about 5 minutes, and you can see that it's changed dramatically because the yeast has reacted with the warm water and foamed up in the bowl, which is how you know that it's actually working. So I'm going to add that to 500 grams of bread flour. And bread flour is important because it has the extra baking soda in it, so your bread will turn out better. I've just created a well in the middle of the flour, and I'm just going to pour my yeast mixture in, as well as an egg. And to start off, just because it's so wet, I'm going to mix with a spoon. So as you can see, the eggs, yeast mixture and flour have all combined, and when it gets to this stage where it's still sticky but it's kind of in one mass rather than a liquid, it's ready to knead. So I'm just going to flour my bench here as well as my hands, and just pour the dough out onto the bench. And it's still quite sticky, so it will stick to your hands at this point. But as you knead it, and as it actually gathers up the flour on the bench, it'll become easier to work with. You should knead the dough for about 20 minutes to develop the gluten. And developing the gluten is really important because it means that while it's rising, it creates air bubbles so it'll result in a light textured bread rather than a heavy and dense one. I'm just going to place it in an oiled bowl, and it can rise for about 1 to 3 hours or until it's doubled in size, and then it's ready to be knocked back before baking. Alright, so this dough has been rising in a warm area for about 3 hours. Now we have to knock it back to make sure there are no air bubbles in the actual baked brioche. So to do that, it's just like kneading like we did before. So you just roll and press. It's a lot less sticky now, so you don't really need to flour the board or your hands. But you just knead it until you start seeing it stick back on itself and kind of fall back into place. When I started kneading this, it felt quite light and bubbly, but now, because I've been kneading it for a couple of minutes and I've knocked the air out, it's feeling quite heavy, and that's when you know that it's ready. So what I'm going to do is divide it up, and we'll get about 10 rolls out of this. So you just pull off a piece and roll it into a ball in your hands, and just until it stops sticking, and that'll make it easier. And place it on a baking tray. So we've rolled out 6 of the balls onto the tray, and they're almost ready to go in the oven. But what we're going to do first is give them an egg wash, and this will make them really nice and golden once they come out of the oven. So I'm just going to dab a little bit of this egg on each roll, and then just to finish them off, I've got some sesame seeds here. I'm just going to sprinkle a little pinch on each one, and that doesn't really affect the taste, it just makes them look nice at the end. And then they're ready to go in the oven for about 20 minutes at 180 degrees. when researching the final items on my menu, first of all, it was kind of great for me because I got to try all these awesome street foods, and you know, that really kind of cultured me in the way that street foods work. And so my brioche buns have come out of the oven, and as you can see, the egg wash has made them really golden on top, and I can feel that they're really light. So you can fill these buns with a number of fillings. I've decided to fill mine with pulled pork, apple slaw, and dill pickles. So what I'm going to do first is cut the bun in half, and then on the top half, I'm going to place a couple of pickles. I made these pickles with Lebanese cucumbers, and they've been pickling for a couple of days now, and you can smell how that's really exaggerated the flavour. I'll grab my apple slaw, and I chose to use apple slaw instead of traditional coleslaw because I know that apple and pork traditionally go really well together, so I thought they would obviously in this scenario too. So I'm just going to place a spoonful of that on the bottom half. For my pork, which I prepared earlier, I'm going to place that on top of the coleslaw. So pulled pork is a traditional Southern American dish, and it's slow cooked pork shoulder, and it's so popular because you can use tough meats such as the shoulder, and as you slow cook them, they soften up and take in all the flavour from things like turmeric and molasses, and it ends up being a really rich, beautiful dish. So once I've got that on top, I'll place the top half of the bun on, and that's a pulled pork slider on brioche with dill pickles and apple slaw.
My name is Freya Flestout, and I went to Suzanne Cory High School, and my portfolio, the overall name of it was Charity Begins at Home, a fundraising dinner featuring Indigenous flavours. Well, my idea for the charity component was to have a dinner that would kind of work towards something, and so the idea behind the charity dinner was raising funds but also awareness for families that suffered through the stolen generations. I decided on my final food items by doing lots of mind maps, and then once I knew what ingredients I wanted to feature, then I had to see if I could get those ingredients, so that kind of cut it down for me. And then once I had like the bush tomatoes, for example, then I knew that that would work really well with the pasta, and I could incorporate mussels, which I really like. The herbs, some of them I knew the flavours already, and also there is a restaurant in Brunswick that uses Indigenous flavours, so I went with my family and they were all really excited. But that was where I learned about the quandong, which is like a little fruit that's similar to an apricot that I used in my dessert for a sauce. And then I purchased a pack online that was mixed herbs, and I just kind of started fiddling and dipping my finger and tasting them, and to kind of figure out the flavours, because I didn't use recipes. I just kind of blended flavours till I got what I wanted. So now I'm going to be putting together the pasta. So the first thing I will do is crack 2 eggs straight in. Or else it'll slippery. Light bulbs. And using an eggshell to get out any shell that you've slopped into the bowl is the easiest way, because when you use your fingers it just gets really slippery. Or if the eggshell's completely messed up, if you wet your fingers first to get it out, then it's the easiest. And in this bowl I'm just going to separate the yolk from one egg, because I want the yolk, because it has the high fat content which will help bind the pasta together, while the egg white is just full of protein, which I don't need at this stage. So that's it. So the egg white goes to the side, and then I'll use a fork to mix the eggs. And then in here I'm just going to sieve the flour, which is 00 flour, which is specially designed for making pasta because it has a high gluten content, which means that it will be more elastic, and that when it's cooked, the high gluten content means that it has enough strength to not just fall apart in the water, so you can get it al dente, which means to the tooth. So then that's sieved. I'll bring it together and make a well in the middle and pour in the egg. So it's 200 grams of flour and 2 full eggs and 1 egg yolk. And then I just lightly dust the flour in, and then using my finger I start to incorporate it all, trying to keep the egg mixture inside the well so it doesn't get too messy. At the start it's kind of soppy and dry, and then now it's quite hard, and when I pull it apart you can see it's still very dry, but it's starting to become a little bit more elastic, and that's why I have to keep kneading it so that the gluten stretches and can become elastic, so that when I pass it through the pasta machine it won't just break up and fall apart. My mother, when she was younger, worked in Indigenous communities with education, and so she's got Indigenous artefacts all around our house, so it was just kind of the idea was on the wall pretty much. And so I knew a little bit about the herbs, and because of the cooking shows like Mark Olive and his cooking books, the flavours weren't as foreign as I thought they were going to be. This is the pasta dough that I prepared so that it would be ready for today, and this is rested for 2 hours, so the gluten is nice and elastic. You can see how it's really pliable, and it's the nice yellow colour that I was looking for, and it's nice and smooth. It's not too dry, but it's still dry when you stretch it out, but there's a bit of an elasticity in it. So I've got the dough here that I'll slice in half, because I don't want to be dealing with too much, and for the bit that I'm not using I wrap it up in glad wrap so that it doesn't get dry and doesn't get a skin on it. And then fold this out a bit and then feed it. And then, so once it's flat I fold it together, and this helps develop the gluten further and will get a nice soft texture for me. When the pasta cooks, rather than taking 9 minutes or 12 minutes, it'll cook in 2 or 3 minutes. When it's fresh and when it's dried, it will take about 5 minutes. And it's a lot lighter and it's not as salty, and it kind of breaks apart in your mouth, while with the bought stuff it can quite often be a little rubbery. Now that the dough is as thin as I want it to be, I'll add some extra flour onto both sides. And then I move the handle up to this up here, which is where I'll cut the pasta. It's always the fiddly bit. This is where the pasta's being cut, and I'm just trying to make sure that it doesn't all stick together when it comes out. So I'll add a little bit extra flour and finish feeding it through. And then it's done. And this can either be cooked straight away, or it can be put onto a drying rack and left overnight, and then it will look like this pasta over there. Now it's the tomato sauce, which we're going to use the steam from the sauce to open the mussels. And I won't put in this mussel because it's slightly open, which means that it might not be good to eat, and when I squeeze it, it isn't staying shut, so I won't include that one. But the rest I'll just carefully put in, and then stir it a little bit and put the lid on, and it's the steam from the sauce that will cook the mussels. I'm just checking the mussels now, and because I can see that they're all open, they are ready to go. So I'll add the pasta that I just boiled, and it took about 2 minutes, into the pot. And 200 grams of pasta flour makes enough pasta for about 4 people, depending depending on how hungry you are. And so I will plate it up by scooping the pasta in, trying not to make a mess, and twirling it a little bit as I go to create height. Now just to garnish, I'll put a little bit of basil on top. And so this is the bush tomato linguine with mussels and chilli.
So my name is Brianna. I went to MLC in 2014 and the name of my menu is The World on Your Plate. My menu was about creating a share plate for the business class lounge of my airline, Paradise Airways. So for my menu I created basically an entree, main, dessert, 2 of each. So I had a pork dumpling that represented Southeast Asia. Then I had a little taco bowl with a salsa and avocado ice cream representing Mexico. Then I had a Moroccan lamb burger where I used spices from Morocco. I had pasta representing Italy. And then I had my desserts, so my mint panna cotta representing the whole world, different aspects from all countries. And then I also had my meringue with the poached pear. I'm going to cook a mint panna cotta. So I've got my 5 gold string gelatin leaves, which I'll place in cold water. It should take about 5 minutes just to soak and really soften. Into my pot, I'll now add my cream and milk. Now also add sugar. And then mint leaves. So really a small handful of mint leaves. During my trialling process, I really learnt that mint has a strong flavour and it was really important to trial how much I need to use, as my first trial was a little bit strong with the mint flavour. So I've really learnt now you just need a little bit. So I put this onto a heap and just stir it until it comes to a simmer. I watch the milk for a few minutes, just until it comes to a simmer. It's important not to get to a boil as that'll be too hot, but just enough to dissolve the sugar and heat the mixture. Okay, so now that the mixture's come to a simmer, I'll pour it through the sieve to remove the mint leaves. So now I get the gelatin, which is all soaked and softened, and squeeze the excess water out, adding it to the hot cream mixture. And stir it to make sure the gelatin evenly dissolves throughout. So that's pretty good right now. So now I have to add the colouring because I really wanted this, although it gives a bit of a mint colour, the natural mint, I really wanted in the photos to have that little extra colour of the mint. So it's really important during this step to get the right amount of colouring, which can be really hard sometimes. So now basically I pour the panna cotta into my moulds. So now I just get this tray and put my panna cottas on there. This will then go into the fridge and will start to set. It should take between 1.5 to 2 hours with the 5 gold gelatin leaves. Okay. So while I'm waiting for the panna cotta to set, I now move on to the toffee. So into my pot, I pour the water in, and then 1/4 cup of water and 1 cup of sugar. I then put it on a low heat to get the sugar to dissolve. It's really important to have the sugar to dissolve, otherwise the toffee is quite grainy in texture and it doesn't have a clear appearance at the end. It's also important to wipe down the edges of the pot on the inside to prevent the sugar from burning and crystallizing and then falling back into the toffee mixture. As the sugar starts to dissolve, it starts to become a lot clearer, the mixture, and more transparent, and that's when you know when all the sugar's dissolved. So the spice I chose to put on top of the toffee was called Ras Al Hanout, if I can pronounce it right. I chose that type of spice because it's from Morocco, and it involves a whole lot of different spices put into one spice mix. And I really wanted to add a contrasting flavour to the toffee. It's not a sweet spice, which toffee is really sweet, so it kind of balances the flavours. During this stage, it's also important not to stir the mixture to allow it to come to a golden colour. Just swirl the pot around to evenly distribute the colour. During this stage, it's really important to keep your eyes on the toffee mixture, as the colour changes quite rapidly and can burn really quickly. So now I turn off the heat, move my tray closer. So now I pour the toffee onto the mat. It's really important to do it at a low height to prevent the toffee from splattering up and burning. At this stage the toffee is still hot, so I'm still able to move it. So I just moved the toffee to get the really thin shards that I wanted to achieve with the toffee. So now I just get my spice mix and I put it into a sieve to get an even amount over the edge, over the whole covering. As it is really strong, you don't really need a lot. Now we just allow it to set and it will go hard, and then once it's hard we can break up the shards. So now I've got my air bubble. And there we go. So panna cotta's come out of the mould. Now we get my chocolate soil. This is a chocolate and rice soil, so it's got sugar, cocoa and toasted rice that's then being ground up, and it really gives that soil appearance. Now I get my toffee shards and just place them into the mixture. Now I get the foam. This is a coconut foam. This is my mint panna cotta with the chocolate and rice soil, coconut foam and Moroccan spice toffee shards.